Greetings and welcome back to another Perspectives. Today we are going to be talking about the great state of Florida, or the not so great state, as I am inclined to refer to it, perhaps as the swamp. I'm joined today by one Alex, who runs a channel called Vox, or Vox in classical Latin, prior to the 2nd century AD. And we're going to be talking about Florida, obviously, as I mentioned. I'm going to do a brief intro to the history of Florida. I know most people get bored with history to some degree, and I think that the majority of the discussion will center around the nitty-gritty of Floridian life in the current year, or the current decade or previous decade, as he's probably most familiar with that. And if you don't know Vox, I first encountered him in a podcast, a discussion, a sort of joint discussion alongside Reactionary Expat. And the reason why I wanted him on is because he is exceptionally enthusiastic and strikes me as a very inquisitive young fellow. So thank you for joining me.
Wow. Thank you.
No, thank you. Begin with the history of Florida very briefly. As many of you can imagine, Florida was uninhabited by Homo sapiens until roughly 14,000 years ago. The Native Americans got there and did a whole bunch of stuff until the Spanish explorer Ponce de Leon discovered it. Allegedly, I don't know if this is actually true, the Fountain of Youth was located in Florida, and so he was on this journey to discover it.
That's ironic.
Yeah. Well, given the fact that it's a fetid swamp, yeah. The Spanish ruled over it for a while, and the British fought them and eventually gained control in the 18th century. And you push on further, and eventually it becomes an official territory, and then it gains statehood in 1845, if my recollection is correct, which would make it the 27th state. It was essentially part of the South during the Civil War conflict. And that's a discussion, obviously, the sort of elements of, is Florida the geographical location withstanding actually part of the South? It's a separate discussion in modern times, but historically had been. We fast forward to modern day Florida, and for the life of me, I cannot understand the appeal of the place. It's one thing to have been born there, but you notice
very few people have been.
Right. In New York State, there are just huge numbers, at least historically, maybe this has changed, of retirees from various parts of New York State, especially New York City, wanting to move down to Florida, allegedly because of the weather. Now, why anyone would want to move to a fetid, humid swamp where it's perpetually, I guess I'll use Fahrenheit, 70 degrees plus is beyond me, but I don't know. So welcome again, Alex. And so I guess the first question I could pose to you about the Gator State is what I just referenced. I mean, Florida is geographically the southernmost state, although that's not. It must be on. Well, Hawaii is a bit more north. Well, no. I would suspect. You know what? I'm not actually an expert on comparing Hawaii, so don't quote me. I believe, at least continentally speaking, yes, the most
continentally, yes, absolutely the southernmost.
But as I said, the history notwithstanding, that is, it was included in the Confederacy and all that jazz. Is Florida actually a southern state in the same sense of Alabama or Georgia? Or is it just kind of an independent entity? What are your thoughts on that?
All right. It depends on, and it really does deeply depend on where you mean in Florida. So the Florida that everyone thinks about, the Florida where all of the crazy shit is constantly in a state of happening, is essentially from Orlando, which is central Florida, down to southern Florida, which is where I'm from. I was from the heart of hell, essentially. Miami is the worst of it. And as you go north from Miami, there's a fascinating caste system that I'll get into later. It is amazingly balkanized. I think it's the future of America in for better or for worse, many parts of America. But yeah, so that's part of Florida. That is give it to those groups. But as far as the Palm Beach area near Loxahatchee. Loxahatchee is a swamp essentially, and palm flats. These it's like palm tree, or I'm sorry, there's some palm trees, and then there's pine needles and pine trees everywhere, and then there are these ferns and these strange shrubbery, and that's nature in South Florida in Loxahatchee. That's where a bunch of Southern boys are. I mean, we're talking cross burners in some of these areas, and they are in relatively close proximity to what is now and essentially occupied territory for the other side, right? These blacks who are very aggressively anti-white. I grew up with that. I'm very well acquainted with them. And that is in the Palm Beach area. And so Palm Beach used to be wooded. And when I moved there in Boynton Beach specifically, there was a small horse ranch down the street from me in this little block, just a few acres of woods, like maybe 5 acres of woods. And there was an orange grove that was across the street from the housing development I lived. And there's lots of housing developments down there. I can get into that later. And as I grew up, I saw the orange grove be removed and replaced with just plenty of more housing developments, and the horse farm replaced with some apartments and then a school. So it's pretty much 2 hours north of Miami. To the west, you have a swamp, and to the east, you have the ocean, and then you have a strip of suburbs and urban sprawl for 2 hours.
I mean, this is urban sprawl.
And that's South Florida.
Interesting, because I can really only think of a few cities in the United States that don't really fit that picture of urban sprawl. Even a place like L.A. is, well, it's sort of the definition of urban sprawl. It's not. It's kind of sort of poorly planned out. I'm not saying Metropolis is a great thing. It's obviously New York. There are massive skyscrapers. Not even Chicago or Philadelphia. That seems to be the kind of the game plan for building American cities on average, a kind of urban sprawl.
It personally, and anybody who's very close to me will know that I have some vehement opposition to this way of living, this way of setting up society and allowing it to grow in this way. It ends up, from what I can see, being very cancerous to the cultures of the people who live in it. Now, for better or for worse, some people want to destroy the cultures, so it's not necessarily bad for everyone involved. But it is something that I saw. There's a malaise, and everybody operates at their worst in this kind of balkanized situation. I saw no culture operating in like a positive way. It feels like there's a certain amount of like tension at all times, and it drives people to be very strange. Because in this urban sprawl, and before we get there, I do want to give a quick amount of just a background of my history there, because it did force me to be around all of the different groups and all kinds of different environments. And it starts, I moved up there when I was 5 years old, and I went to an all-black elementary school because my parents didn't know how bad the school system was in Florida. It's essentially that unless you can get your kids into an okay school system, you're in one of the okay regions, what's going to end up happening is your kid's either going to be a minority or he's going to be on a bit of a social battleground.
What was that like? I mean, when you say all black, you mean something like 90% black, right?
Yeah. Well, so it wasn't just like 90% black. It was like, think 90. 85% black, and then most of the rest of the percentage was Hispanic.
So, yeah, so basically
everyone
any
else,
sort of...
anyone else who lived in that area who was white was wealthy.
Mm-hmm.
So
they go to that school, consequently.
They would go to Christian
kids to the school. Yeah.
They would go to Christian private schools. Right. And so, yeah, I went to this school. Now, what's fascinating is they had an orchestra and like a music program. It was a charter school, but it was also a very poor charter school. It is a strange place. I used to get bullied a lot. I went there for, I think, till 4th grade.
Did you get bullied for racial reasons? Like, you punk-ass white boy, what the fuck you want? Or something like that?
Well, a little bit, but it's more, the thing is, it never even got that far. I was underfoot very quickly, and I was in like a weird world. I mean, especially at that age, not to get too far into how races develop differently, but at that age, it felt like a bizarre world for me. Because I was always very intelligent, so I'm kind of at the upper end of, let's say the distribution. Not like 140 or I don't know, I don't care. But you get what I'm saying. I'm decent end of the distribution, and then I was going to an almost entirely minority school that was teaching to that level. I knew how to read pretty good out of preschool.
Pretty well, by the way.
Yeah. Well, I said pretty good.
They didn't learn you that too well there. Anyway.
Pretty good by the end of preschool, but I knew how to read all right by the end of preschool. Then when I went into kindergarten there, they didn't even teach how to read at all.
So this is interesting. Scholastically, I mean, let's talk about reading and writing skills. You went... What were, roughly speaking, the age in terms of years that you attended the school?
So, I can't remember how the ages play out at all. I was always bad about that. But I went from...
Roughly.
Yeah, I went from kindergarten to 4th grade.
Okay, so would you, if you have any recollection, but let's try to be accurate here, in 4th grade, would you say that people were still struggling with basic reading at that stage?
Yes. Yeah, completely. A lot of people were. This started my very early career of the teacher having me go and help students. I have a very long career of that in my life. That's like something that I always remember doing. So yeah, the teacher always had me helping other students who were my age, who, really struggled to read. But by 4th grade, mostly everyone had it down, They were just bad at it. But they pretty much had it down. But some of them still had problems sounding out words.
Right.
I was unique in that I could read really well in 2nd grade. Extremely unique. And, yeah. And I was reading novels in 3rd and 4th grade. I was reading, like, the Left Behind series and stuff. But I know. But listen. And then I started reading vampire novels, all right? So it didn't get much better for a little while. But yeah, I did love playing the violin, though. I'll tell you what, it was my escape, really. So
you were actively bullied. Do you think that it was racially driven, or just sort of?
Here's how I described it then. I'll tell you what I told my mother then, and it's still true to this day. So everybody had a group that would defend them except for me. Mm-hmm. Everybody had their own group. I didn't have my group because I'm peach colored, is what I would say.
Yeah, you're not really pale enough to pass into the honorary Aryan halls, but not dark enough to.
No, because there was none of, there was no white kid. There was some white kids, and
right.
They were all like poor and disparate through the, they weren't around. I didn't know them. And then, and so also I would like to say at this point, I guess we're going to just stay on the elementary for one sec. There's there are multiple black racial groups that a lot of I realize now, being fun fact about me, I'm part of the alt-right. I consider myself as in the alt-right. Is that a lot of people, especially who have like this really strong white identity, don't get that blacks have very strong specific black identities. Especially in an area where there's lots of black immigration. So we had immigration from the islands, the Caribbean, and we had and a lot of Jamaicans, right? And then we had immigration from Haiti. And then you had the blacks who were just like there already. They're already kind of Americanized
Seminoles,
black.
perhaps you're referring to. The Seminoles being... Sorry, go on.
The Seminoles, weren't those Indians?
Well, my
I don't know.
understanding, maybe I'm wrong on this, is that the Seminoles were kind of, well, mixed and ended up being more black than anything else, but were the byproduct of...
A lot of these blacks are more like really southern types from what they look like and talk like. But they talk like, and also a lot of their families from like Georgia. Like a lot of these people are blacks who've migrated down here from Georgia and stuff.
None of this strikes me as particularly remarkable. It seems obvious that I'd met tons of Caribbean blacks in my life.
Most of the people,
if you're from Trinidad and Tobago, you're gonna have no point of comment necessarily, apart from having,
And I've been to Jamaica on a missions trip, quote unquote, to a sister church there. I'm no longer consider myself a Christian, but I was very committed. Raised a lot of money just to do that, and their culture is like way better than American black culture, honestly.
Yeah,
it's way. I love it. Like, I actually really enjoyed that. Here's why I liked it. I just want to say really fast. You go to church and there's really good music, and then you go home and you hang out, and then somebody's probably playing really good music somewhere. And so there's always really good music, and it really helps ease the pain of living in Jamaica.
I've Caribbean is one of the few places I've not really set foot on, but I have met many people from various places. Like I said, I've met a lot of refer to Trinidadians. I don't know, people from Trinidad to Tobago, Jamaica. I've met Dominicans.
As individuals, they tend to be. I got along. My brother was. He had dreads down to his lower back, and he was like the only white guy in a reggae band. So I suppose me and my brother. Maybe
what I think it is, or what I think it's play here, is that it's. I think the notion of sort of black separatism in the United States has a much stronger historical root. Whereas, let's say you are an immigrant, or you're the child of an immigrant from a place. Actually, most familiar with Trinidad and Tobago. There's no real connecting point there, and so
the Haitians are the same way.
Haiti is pretty much a shithole.
Well, so here's the other thing about Florida, and this is another important part. Everyone shits on the Haitians. No one believes, and because there's these different black cultures at play, the interplay between blacks and whites blacks and every other group is different, because the other groups are like, wait a minute, black people, there is not just blackness. That's not like, that's a silly concept, because you have these other two black groups that you guys shit on. And they know that. So the black people in Florida don't seem to ascribe to this same, you could call it Pan-American blackism. Kind of like if we were trying to force Pan-European nationalism, like Pan-white European nationalism on Europeans, they wouldn't. What are you talking about? There's other, and they're just like us. And it's the same with the blacks in Florida. It's like, well, we're not just all the same, and they know it.
It's a very American thing, this notion of, white people or black people, as opposed to people who happen to be black and people happen to be white. In the context of some nation or a specific territory.
Hey, you come up to Ohio. Listen, like, there are different white ethnic groups that run shit. in different areas.
Yeah.
And the groups that are here know that. You know that the Italians tend to have the business in this area, the Greeks tend to have, I don't know. I don't get why people aren't more aware of that in the world, but I don't know. America should be viewed as like already fractured and balkanized before we even.
Well, absolutely, and I think it's a bit of a, for the alt-righters, I guess, dismay and disappointment. It's a bit of a pipe dream. I mean, even in the late 19th century, there were not so insignificant numbers of Anglos, basically. Of course, it picked up significantly throughout subsequent decades, but
yeah, I mean, I'm an Irish Italian. Tell me about it.
So you're a wop and a mick and a wop. I haven't heard.
Yeah,
I have not heard those terms in ages. In fact, even when I was growing up, they were relics. But in any event, it's but that's the thing. It seems to me, and so we're kind of getting alt-right territory, and not specifically maybe relevant to Florida. Maybe it is.
It's cool. We'll get back there.
Sure. That what is? I mean, that's the thing. White people, but very few people outside the alt-right identify as a white person. They might say, well, they're white, but their background is, I don't know, French and German, or Italian, or
yes,
or Irish, or whatever. Or it just I mean, and this is, I guess, a criticism I would have of the alt-right. It's a very flimsy term, and it has very little meaning. And there's a kind of paradox here, because a lot of people in the alt-right will stress that race is much more than skin color, which I completely agree on. Genetic populations differ in more than just melanin production. It's obvious.
But so is identity.
And right, but here's the paradox that I see. The sort of connecting, or the overarching factor for the alt-right is essentially melanin production, being white, but without differentiating between the various subgroups. And this could just be a pragmatic decision on the part of certain people who would belong to the quote unquote white race.
When you say it's okay, let's back up really quickly. I want to say that is true from one standpoint, and the standpoint that is true is when you're speaking to the alt-right's quote-unquote leadership. If you're talking about what the alt-right's quote-unquote leadership has said and has put forward as what they want, yes, I tend to agree with you. But if we're talking about the alt-right writ large, right, we're talking about, well, I suppose not writ large, I should say at large, because I'm talking about all of the individuals in it. The conversation that I've been having tends to, well, maybe the conversation that I've been pushing, I should say, tends to be more about localized communities based off of regional. We basically have a few different breeds of Amerikaner from different regions of the United States of America, and these different groups have their own different cultures. You have Appalachia, you have the South, and you have Cascadia, as people refer to it. There's these different areas, and frankly, they can be split up into much smaller regions. I agree.
For example,
but what I was going to say is the alt-right. I mean, they call Appalachia White Afghanistan for a reason. It's because if a Pennsylvanian from an Ohioan, those are two very different breeds of people, and they know it, but they're cousins and they know it, and I think that a federation style system that the alt-right, a lot of people in the alt-right seem to be looking for, like an almost, trying to be, they're trying to get the best of both worlds, but I think it's conceivable that you could have an authoritarian federal system, a federation system with strong authoritarian rule, and then give regions, or states, but regions, more autonomy to do as they will for their populations and their actual nations. Because the actual nations we're talking about here are like because Switzerland has a few different ethnic groups at play, but they cooperate. I think that you can get that same cooperation in different areas of the United States with the different groups that preside there, right? And so they all have their own interplay. And I think that that's where the alt-right is ultimately going.
You're referring, of course, to the canton system. Well, I mean, yeah,
That's what a lot of the conversation is right now in the alt-right. I'm talking like I am talking to people, in some cases in leadership positions or shaker mover positions, that this is the conversation I'm having with them, and this is the long-term what things will break down to be in reality, probably, right? That's what I think. But the idea of the white identity and pushing that, being pro-white, is more just to prime people to start digging deeper, I believe. Because what you really want them to dig to is family identity and their family history in a given geographic area, and then applying that to themselves. You know, that kind of more nuanced approach. I agree. I think that you can have both ways, but the core alt-right position needs to be general enough that it'll appeal to the groups of people that we need it to appeal to in the United States, right?
Yeah,
So
I'm not sure if...
Sorry for the long explanation, but I did want to be thorough about
fine.
that. I'm thinking about it a lot.
I'm not sure if Switzerland is necessarily analogous.
But I just meant like different. I just mean somewhat different ethnic groups that can cooperate in an alliance with one another.
Vaguely, but many, I mean, you know, for example, Italian-speaking Swiss people don't really like German-speaking Swiss people, and vice versa. It's just sort of...
Yes, but they respect one another's boundaries enough, and the country's Switzerland's holding together better than America. Right?
Yes, it's also infinitely smaller.
And also I want to say I am a fatalist about the Republic, the United States of America. I'm a fatalist, so I approach everything with a bit of a fatalist eye, which is why I don't even think about the. You know, if you ever notice, all of my focus is on like, okay, get your families together, get your friends together, you'll make it through. Because I'm almost fatalistic about everything, right? So I'm trying to think of the smallest level to come at it from. In the alt-right, which would be family identity over everything else.
Fair enough. We definitely want to get back there, I suppose.
Yeah.
But
so
getting back to the swamp.
So I wanted to...
You finished that aspect of your life, or that period of your life at school?
I went to Christian private school after that all-black elementary school, and that gave me the worst of the WASPs. I got to see, oh my gosh, how terrible white people are. I hated them. What did
you hate about them specifically?
Well, here's the culture I'm speaking of is wealthy, bourgeois whites. So these are the upper middle class, and pretty much most whites in Florida either exist in trailer parks or in very high upper middle class, with Jews walking among them in a big way. And this is in like Boca. I'm talking.
The Jews are not amongst the trailer trash.
No. Well, no. I meant the more wealthy,
right.
waspy. Anyway, so this was in Boca Raton, Florida, and there's other places that there are enclaves of WASPs, and they all live they prefer to live in gated communities with a wall around them. This is very normal in Florida. It's everywhere in Florida. Mm-hmm. And I grew up with it, and as being normal thing. And when I talk to people about this, they go like, what? And I go, yeah, everybody has walls around their communities. That's normal. And then you have the trailer park, and then you have the ghetto. And that's the three places. Those are the three types of communities I see. It's like, it's one or the other, you know, there's not a lot in between. Anyway, so I was always fortunate enough to normally grow up in something analogous to a gated community. My parents always liked the extra security, and who can blame them? And then, anyway, I went to these Christian private schools, and the religiosity and the absurdity in some of the rules and teachings of the schools were really upsetting. And I think part of what drove me to see the I really don't want to be offensive to my religious
nobody. I am highly irreligious. Nobody will be offended if you're offensive towards
but
religious.
It raised to me the feeling and the realization that religion was just absurd. I saw it in front of me all the time, and I tried.
Hold on a second. So these people, the children of these wealthy people, they weren't actually religious, really. They were just sort of going through the motions, or they'd actually believe this stuff.
The younger ones would do that, right? And it's like almost everybody had like an ironic belief in Christianity, but then at the end of the day, if you push them, they really were Christians, which was like kind of adorable. Like they were like, yeah, I ironically believe this, and then you push them, you ask them questions, and they're very sincere and earnest. So that was cute. I always thought that was kind of like, oh, good. At least there's some earnestness in the world left. But at the same time, I was always friends with the gothy kids and the kids that were the rebels, right? The girls who wore the dark makeup. And I kind of brought them together in one of these schools. I went to 3 different Christian private schools. I brought them together in one of these schools, and that got me essentially bullied out of the school by the administration because I was basically fomenting a counterculture, and they didn't like that. That was in middle school. I got kicked out of that one. That was Highlands. And then I played in a quartet there, my violin in a quartet. That was a later one. I think that was 6th grade or something along those lines. And then and I went to 2 other ones I won't get into. But yeah, the fakeness, and then there was a sincerity with some of the Christianity. Like there was great pastors, there was great speakers, but you know, I started feeling rebellious and questioning, and I got one too many God works in mysterious ways and the logic of man is fallible, which are like just cop-out, answers. Mm-hmm. So I got one too many of those from people who were supposed to be very high up and intelligent and I could give better answers to my young self now that I've studied it. I could actually argue for Christianity better than they could. But really, what I'm getting down to is there was a failure on all fronts to hold the facade up to me of what was going on, and I just wasn't having it. So anyway, I always got kicked out of these schools for not doing homework. That was it. So homework made me so. I used to have panic attacks and cry sitting in front of my homework trying to do. I would sit there and I would look at it, and it would be.
I want to try.
And I don't know what happened.
Steer the conversation back to sort of Florida.
Absolutely. The WASPy. So the girls were brutal and in control of everything. Is a big part of it. In these Christian private schools, they just and then the guys were. I don't know. I never participated with men that were my age when I was a teenager because they were just too stupid. No offense to them, maybe they weren't, but I couldn't get along with them. But the females were just too brutal and wretched and drove one of my friends to suicide, actually.
Interesting.
Yeah, which was very, that was a little upsetting to me. I didn't like that very much. But I blame myself, as did other people. And yeah, the reason I'm saying that is the culture there. That girl who committed suicide was a trailer park girl, right? She did drugs. She started doing drugs at 13, I think. She committed suicide at 15. And the upper middle class would just destroy anything that they could. These kids would just destroy people just because they could.
They're teenagers. I mean,
yeah, but and I get that. I really do, but there's a certain degree of female, and this is going to appeal to you a little bit, female flaws to just simply be allowed to run rampant. Female, evils simply being something that people shrug off.
Well, yeah, but that's been the case for decades and decades. This isn't
Yeah,
exceptional or I'd say unique to the situation.
It definitely. I didn't mean to talk over you. Yeah, it definitely just raised that problem to me at that stage. You know, a friend committing suicide made you think real hard about a problem.
Sure, yeah.
So yeah, in fomenting this counterculture, I made my first friends, who were all, generally speaking, lower class, counterculture gothy kids and scene girls and stuff, right? This is in the 2000s. And then after that, I went to I should say early middle school, I went to a charter school, and it was a wreck, and I won't get into it. It was not much was learned there. And then I went to a ghetto military school. I won't go too much into the reasons why my parents decided to send me there. It was not good reasons, and they've given me apologies since. But I went to a military school for about a year, and it was in Fort Lauderdale. And Fort Lauderdale is predominantly black, or at the time seemed to be.
Fort Lauderdale, is that an actual city, or is that just sort of a suburb of a city? Okay.
Yeah, it is a city. As a matter of fact, on Haitian Day, which is a day, on Haitian Day, there was a car that drove by, and it had Haitian flags on every one of its hubcaps, and Haitian flags out the back windows, and there's two guys holding, like, half out of the car with AKs waving them around. So that's Fort Lauderdale.
Okay.
At least then. That is Florida, by the way. Like if you go to these towns, like where the blacks, like where either the Haitians control it or the Jamaicans control it, like they're just wired directly into the power transformers.
Now the Haitian blacks, they I guess you sort of alluded to this. They don't really get along with the native blacks, if you want to put that. Okay, anyone.
Yeah, in welding school, these are like, there's a group of like mostly white guys, and then there's like some Guatemalans and like black guys. Everybody had a Haitian story.
Yeah, speaking of, so
everybody will tell you about how a Haitian woman goes through their garbage on garbage day, or how some loud, rude thing that a Haitian guy did. Like, it's just such a normal thing in Florida. It's not considered racism. It's just what the Haitians are.
What about
crazy.
The relationship of Hispanics and their many subdivisions to different ethnic or cultural populations?
So I've always been accepted by Hispanics because of how Italian I am, right. And I have really bronze skin, and there's some overlap there in like how excitable and verbose, and so yeah, the Hispanics seem to be pretty. The ones I knew were pretty accepting of me, right? But they weren't in the ghettos. The ghetto Hispanics, I don't know. Like, I don't know what their interplay was. It seemed like
how separatist, intentionally or otherwise. So I mean, in New York City, you'll get whole communities that are just, you won't even hear a lick of English. It'll just be
absolutely. If you go to Miami and you look even vaguely Hispanic, everybody will assume you speak Spanish and talk to you in Spanish. All the stores.
You must get that a lot, or have gotten that.
Yeah, all the stores in Miami, like all of like the Walmarts and all that crap, they're all. It feels like you're in a Hispanic country because everything, like all of the cashiers, like if you want to get a job down there in service, they really want you to be bilingual, unless it's like a touristy spot. If it's like a working man thing, they need you to be bilingual because everybody speaks. It's 64% Hispanic in Miami. So
now, when you say that, obviously there are many different types of Hispanics. I would imagine the majority or the bulk of that is Cuban, right?
There's a lot of Cubans. When you get north of Miami, there's a lot of Guatemalans.
Mm-hmm. But not so many Puerto Ricans or Dominicans.
Oh, and yes. One of my best buddies was Jimmy. Shout out to you, Jimmy. He's a cool guy. is shit. I think he's Venezuelan. Yeah, they're basically every. It's a hop, skip, and a jump away from all of South America, really.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
I met people from everywhere. I never assumed. But yeah, a lot of Cubans. And interestingly, because the Cubans have been coming for so long, we have some of the most Americanized Cubans. A lot of the Cubans, and here's another thing. A lot of the Cubans, you can red pill them. They're very easily right wing because their parents told them about communism, generally, or their grandparents did.
But there are clear divisions. For example, the Dominicans, the Cubans won't necessarily associate with non-Hispanic people, but also, would you say that there are divisions between Cubans and Guatemalans as well?
Yeah, absolutely, because those are all different types of. They all have their own languages.
Yeah.
And they're all going to speak those languages. So I was in Lake Worth, and yeah, like anywhere you go that there's a concentration, they generally own like a few blocks, pretty much. And if you go there, they're all posted up outside, they just own those areas. If you go into any stores, they're their store. You can tell they're for them. Mm-hmm. None of the signs are in English. They don't in any way cater to people outside of their group. Mm. So, yeah, that's very common for especially the Hispanics. But then, yeah, that's every ethnic group pretty much.
Well, I was about to ask you, in this sprawling mix, where does Jewry fit in?
Boca Raton, Florida, among the wasps, the wealthy wasps. That's where Jewry fits in pretty well. There's a road. There's a road called Yamato Road. And it has lots of Japanese cool stuff. By the way, Murakami Gardens is a cool place I used to go all the time because it's Japanese. Anyway, so Yamato Road has a temple, I forget. Yeah, there's a temple, a church, and a synagogue, all right next to each other. And the church has a lot of people who call themselves Messianic Jews. The church I went to a lot. And these Messianic Jews, as far as they explained it to me, were essentially Christians who still hold on to all of their Jewish traditions. So I've been to like a bunch of Passovers, right? I've been to.
They're not the. I suppose it's kind of a meme now. The sort of the alt-right Shlomo Sheckelstein type avatar types.
No, and there's something like there's something real fun and earnest about all their rituals, and they actually seem really sincere and stuff. But at the same time, and also I'm surprised that my church seemed to, I think it still does, hold on to homosexuality being a sin thing. Which is impressive considering it's in the middle of Boca Raton, Florida, which is, by the way, I went to Boca Raton Community High School after this super ghetto military school, and it was if somebody made a gay joke and it was in earshot of a girl, the girl would, browbeat the guy for making a gay joke. It was very, so, I grew up in a very liberal environment in Boca, right? In Boca, oh God. And so the Jews were among my friends. There's also I dated a Russian Orthodox Jew, who visited Israel and stuff, I dated a girl like that. Well, I knew a lot of people who went and visited Israel, tons of them. So
what do you think then, I don't know if you ever had a conversation with them, their thoughts were on the relation between Israel and the United States? Do you think that they thought in terms of Israeli priorities over the United States, or?
No, but this church was very. I don't see. That's the thing. Back then, that was so far out of my realm of.
Well, you said you dated an Orthodox Jewish girl, right?
Oh, yeah, but the thing is, she was a complete and utter heathen. Or, not heathen, hedonist. Yeah. Yeah, that's another thing. Like most Jewish girls that I've known a bunch, tend to be the wild ones. They tend to be very hedonistic, very rebellious, very sexual at a pretty from the get go. I don't want to say dominantly sexual, but pushy, like they're going to get it out of you kind of girls. And considering, they pass on their, they're, what's the word? Matriarchal.
Right.
Well,
so, but you're painting a picture of a very, very divided Florida. Florida, everyone is kind of sticking to his or her group.
Oh my gosh, yes,
for the most
it
part.
is utterly divided. Yeah,
that doesn't. I could imagine that, based on my own experience in the United States, that's not really unique. This just seems to be across the board the case. It's kind of multiculturalism doesn't work. However,
yeah, I got to see it firsthand. Well, and so I just wanted to say really fast, in this military school I went to about a year, I got 2 out of the 3 academic excellence awards for the entire school, which is not a lot of people, and also the cadet of the year. And I wasn't trying even a tiny bit. I was miserable. I was doing the bare minimum, but I still got these things simply because everybody there was an idiot, like a complete idiot. It was amazing how stupid everyone is. And yeah, some of the kids there were there because they had for armed robbery and stuff. So
nice.
Yeah, I got beat up on there physically a lot, and it hardened me, and it taught me to be less of a, I guess, a pussy, if you will. And it was good for me in the same way that any traumatic experience that you learn from is. But it also strengthened me up. But I got to know the adult screwed up side of, and by adult I mean 17-year-olds, but the grown up version of that ghetto culture, and it's very scary. I mean really scary, really violent and really primal, and it taught me the real interplay between men in the real world. When you take away the auspice of if you take away violence, you get this version of man that is actually being really dishonest and feminine. And once you add violence back in, man, guys are a lot more honest. So I learned a lot about that, and that was from blacks and some Hispanic, mestizo types, mostly blacks in that school as well. And then, like I said, I got to see the Haitians run around with their AKs. They're very crazy. They don't really and nobody gives a shit about the laws in any of these areas, by the way. In these black cultures, no one is concerned with law at all.
So they would, just an example, they would openly, take out, say, a crack pipe in theory and just...
No. There's, you don't act crazy. I know that this sounds crazy. Well, they don't care about the law, but don't act crazy. But they do have, some basic, it's, how can I explain it? It's like our society if we were way more willing to just be violent whenever. And it's really weird because of that. Because and this is these are delinquent kids. This is not just all of them. This isn't the average. I'm talking about I was basically hanging out with what was going to be lifelong criminals. So, not the best of the best, right? But I got to see what, how a lot of them talked. And the thing is I don't know, it was weird. I liked seeing it and being around it, and also I won't get into my experiences growing up too much with, I had some black friends that I would hang out with, and I was the crazy white guy, right? I knew a lot about guns, and I knew a lot about drugs, and so they liked me, right? Just because I like reading, and they like me because I have the resources. So if pro tip, if you're a white guy stranded among minorities, be a very valuable business asset, and you'll be fine, because they know seriously.
Now,
they can make use of you, right?
If you go to the more northern parts of Florida, the parts that are adjacent to, say, Georgia,
Way more
Louisiana.
southern
Yeah.
culture, basically. And a matter of fact, very red. It's a very white part up at the Panhandle, so it's just a very good old boys. Where I was in the heart of occupied territory, essentially. You know, right after Boca, and if you go south, it's all just their working service class humans. And so they ship in from Boca to Boca Raton, Florida. They basically ship all of their service workers and security guards. And here's amazing. Listen, if there isn't anything more Jewish than this, after 9 p.m., everything is closed in Boca Raton, Florida. After 9 p.m., everything is closed. And if you are on the streets and you see another car, it's probably a police car. That is Boca Raton, Florida. It is a bizarre place. And then if you go to Delray Beach, if you go to Delray Beach at around if you go to Delray Beach after dark, or you go to Lake Worth, which is north of Boca, anyway, if you go to anywhere north of Boca or south of Boca, in the cities or whatever, there's homeless people roaming everywhere. In Boca Raton, in the streets of Boca Raton and downtown, there's no one.
Question is, though, what do you think is appealing or redeeming or nice about the state of Florida that makes it, say, distinct from other states, that makes it, well, why would anyone want to live there, in your estimation? Illusion?
Utter illusion. Oh. That's it. Well, for the old people, think about it this way. If all you're going to do is sit in your house all day and go outside occasionally, then you can just go to a gated community there and you'll never see any of this.
No.
You'll never see any of it. You'll never see anything that I just spoke about. All the terrible shit that you have to deal with. That's only there if you go over your wall. If you drive if you drive 10 minutes that way, then that's a problem. But if you just stay where you are, don't worry about it. So it's perfect for boomers who didn't have many kids, who have a bunch of money left over, who are not going to invest it in property to pass down to their kids or anything like that. And they're just trying to live it up and have fun now that they don't have to worry about that. But they're old and they can't be too active. Well, you can go live with a bunch of other people who are somewhat old, who aren't particularly active, away from your family, never have to deal with your family again. It is poison, right, for our culture. And then, so that's for the old people. For young people, so here's the thing. Whites go to Florida en masse on rehab. Their parents, upper middle class parents, send them there. So there's a giant, huge white rehab culture. I say white rehab culture because I don't see a lot of other parents sending their kids there that aren't white. So it's this bizarre subculture, and it's mixed heavily with the hippies. I used to go to drum circles and stuff because it's something to do. I like to fire dance, as you do. A normal man likes to fire dance. I go to drum circles, like to have fun, and just, I like the environment and the music and everything. It makes sense. It's something that we're missing when you take out Christianity. You take out religion, and you kind of remove communal music. And communal music is badass, actually. Communal music's great for the spirit. It's great for smiling. And so, yeah, I would go to these things, and yeah, it's just a giant rehab culture of people going there to rehabilitate from drugs. And basically, instead of rehabilitating from drugs, most of them just do less terrible drugs. And that's still, it's better than nothing.
Why? But eventually you left. You don't live in Florida anymore. So
no.
Why? It seems, given the picture that you're painting, why? Why did you?
Well, my family lives up in Ohio, as do most people's families in Florida. They normally live up north somewhere. So my family's from Ohio. I wanted to move back up here because I want to pursue the trades, and there's no industry down there. I also, if I was going to have a kid, I would never subject them to that environment.
Right.
Because there is no escaping the problems. You can't take your kid, there's just no escaping the issues of Florida. It's South Florida. Now, anything north of South Florida that isn't Orlando or something. Orlando has its own problems. I won't even go there. Orlando is its own kind of weird mess. But anything that isn't those areas are actually fine. But in the same way that upstate New York is probably just fine. I don't know if it is, but upstate New York is probably just fine.
Boring,
and
fine, yeah.
Yeah, and in North Florida, it's very southern. It is a very southern state. It's just South Florida, anything south of Orlando and further down should just be given away to a corporate interest because it is such a globalist hellhole. As far as I can tell, I mean, yeah. I experienced lots of cultures down there. But they are there's a bunch of insular ethnic groups, like minority ethnic groups, that are elbowing everybody out of the way because, they're acting as a community, so they're going to make shit happen, right? I mean, that's how this works. Yeah. Like, you act as a community and you win. You act insularly and you have a miserable culture. Like, they have a miserable white culture there that I just dislike. Now, if you are a conformist, you can make do with that wealthy white culture. But I saw a lot of, young guys. Good example. My friend lives on this property that golfers, they used to allow golfers to use the property in between the houses. And then they basically just kicked all the golfers off because they got tired of it and they let it grow out, right? And he grew up in this middle class malaise of directionlessness and without purpose. And that is, and that's the reason that the drug culture there got so bad in Florida, because you just have these middle class kids running around these gated worlds where they don't have to face reality and they have an allowance. And what are they going to do?
Before we were speaking on the topic of facing reality, before we officially started, I was telling Vox about this incident I had last night, which was not necessarily even atypical, although in its proportions it was. I was playing.
Allow me to be right back in like 1 moment. I really need to use the restroom. I'm about to cry out of my eyes.
Okay. Well, I'll tell the story and
exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
In any event, audience, this is one of the more stranger perspectives. I think he's an interesting guy. In any event, I was playing Overwatch with a friend on NA using his account because I was late. This was not the first time I encountered a guy who was pretty good at his role. But he began the match talking about how the allegedly exceptional vocabulary he commanded, and how English wasn't his first language, but he spoke fluent Spanish was, and he spoke fluent Spanish and Portuguese. And I thought, okay. And then he said he lived in Kenya, and I thought, huh. And the embellishment and what turned out to be obvious lies, it just grows and grows. I said, well, your ping must be terrible. So, oh, it's not too bad. It's 110. Now I live in Germany. If I'm playing on any server, I get about 125. So not too much of a difference. But if you're based in Kenya, and Kenya is not equidistant to Germany with respects to the United States, your ping would probably be about 300, I suspect. Maybe 250. I don't know exactly. Challenged him, and I said, well, he says to me, well, I'm on, I'm using an American, VPN. I said, well, that has no effect on the physical distance. And he just goes on. And I have been to Kenya twice, and so I grilled him on some names and geography. I said, well, do you speak Swahili? He said, well, this is a myth because not everyone in Africa speaks African languages. And then he just started failing multiple geography tests. I asked him, how many countries are adjacent to Kenya, and he said, well. Then what really gave it away was he claimed that he'd lived in Buffalo, New York for 3 years. Now I've visited Buffalo, never lived there. He says, well, I lived in Buffalo, New York for 3 years, and it wasn't even till the end until I found out that Buffalo, New York borders Virginia, or rather New York borders Virginia, and New York State does not border Virginia. Certainly not Buffalo, which is even further north than most places. And he said, oh, it didn't? And then I finally sort of nailed him by saying, well, what's the capital of Kenya? I could have asked any of these questions. And he actually left the game. Now, that was an extreme example of something I've encountered several times, particularly in NA servers and Overwatch, of just people telling outright lies. For example, another one was a denizen clearly of the Midwest based on his intonation and his vowel quality, claiming he'd grown up in Manhattan. Absolutely impossible, given his phonology, but also didn't really know the geography of New York City. And so we were talking before, Vox and I, about why anyone would see the need to this, because when I was growing up, yeah, I was a kid, I was a teenager, I lied. I played hooky for 2 days in a row once until I got caught, and I lied about it. Well, before I got caught, obviously. And, I mean, the idea to embellish to this degree and sort of create a fantasy world where it didn't even exist because there was no online kind of faceless opportunity to create that type of situation. But why this kid, I think he must have been a teenager, would just go to these lengths to make all this stuff up. Presumably, in most situations, people would just not care or buy it. But I'm a 40-year-old person with a fair degree of education, so it's not the same thing. But Vox was touching on a point, and I probably would agree with him that modernity or modern culture is so vapid and so empty and so unfulfilling that is driving the youth to just outright deny reality in its entirety and create entire fantasy worlds in their discourse. Where they're like superheroes, superhero Genji, as this guy was. Well, admittedly, he was pretty good Genji, actually. It wasn't too bad. But, who lives in Kenya and speaks fluent Portuguese and Spanish and, you couldn't make this up. It was,
I wonder if people that feel like this, at some point in the road, I wonder if they come to an existential depression about what they're doing, or if they're doing this because they're not the type of person who gets existentially depressed in the first place. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Well, obviously there's going to be a fair degree of individual variation in how in depression is a
well, when I say depression, what I'm okay, so I don't want to let's avoid that word. But when I say existential depression, I'm more it's almost a turn of phrase to me now.
Right.
What it actually means is you wonder if they look at what they're doing and consciously go, there's no fucking point. There's no point to all of this. If because I remember I did that. I had, except it was depression for me.
Yeah, I think you're onto something, and I'll tell you why. Because this guy clearly, by the breadth and depth of his prevarication, saw no consequence in just. It wasn't even lies. It was total fiction. However, the second he was confronted with the reality, the fact that some people are aware of geography, people have actually visited Kenya.
Yeah.
It makes no sense to have a better ping in Kenya than one in Germany. If you're all these facts kind of added up, he was forced to he was confronted with his own mendacity and his own lies, and he just left the game. I mean, it must have been incredibly embarrassing. But that tells me that in his daily life, this teenager, probably was a white teenager actually, I would assume, based on all these other things. This teenager just is never held to account for the fantasies that he cooks up and tells people, at least on the internet. And when he is held to account, he flees away from it rather than saying, "Oh, he could have just said, I was just making all of that up." No, it was so embarrassing to him being confronted with reality that he just left.
So you know how you said you played hooky for 2 days?
Yeah, once. I lied about this. I think I was 15.
In high school, are you familiar with the phrase senioritis?
I can imagine what it means. You're sort of tired of school, right?
Well, what it refers to specifically is the habit for seniors to start skipping chronically towards the end of the year.
I would have imagined that, yes.
Yeah. I had senioritis by the end of freshman year of high school. Now, I should add, this is directly after being in military school. I like that situation I told you about. So, can you imagine how fake society's facades feel after you've been in a military school like that? Where you're like, in a constant, like, you get respect because you want to fight people for fun. Like, that's the environment. Like, fighting is normal. Getting punched in the head is not the most abnormal thing. You know, trying to throw each other on the ground for fun is normal, and it's all blacktop, and everything's miserable. And I saw a kid I'm not exaggerating, I saw a 17-year-old boy be pile drived by an adult man. Right, pile drived into the ground. like the wrestling move. So I went, then after that I go to my freshman year of high school. It just all seems so fragile and incorrect and silly, right? And so by the end of my freshman year, I was just so done. I was so miserable. Oh, I won't even go. I could go on and on about why it made me miserable.
I was actually playing hooky I just was always an oddball. I didn't fit in with any group, and I didn't have a particularly fun time in high school.
Well, yeah, but so what I was to say, though, is like I just started skipping constantly, and I was in school. There were some weeks that I would skip most of the week, and then the next week I would go 3 days maybe. And the teachers didn't care. I would come in for tests, and I just stopped caring about the system, and the system didn't mind. And I think that's what I'm getting at is there's no if you call the bluff, right? He's calling the bluff of like reality. Like he's calling everyone's bluff, even though he's not doing it consciously, and he's being like pathologically he's being, you know, borderline crazy in that behavior. But there is a certain degree of like, well, of course he's just an animal. He found out like a hack in the system. Well, you can just lie and nobody says shit. So I'm just gonna fucking lie. You know, like just the conditioning allows him to do so. Because in the real world, like you can just bullshit your way through everything now. All of school can be bullshitted through. Everything.
That is my impression, based on, I've seen there's certain work avenues, some writing samples of people your age or younger. And, you know, I'm incredulous at it that this would even be accepted as quote-unquote college-level writing.
Here's the advantage of this all is that the people who look inward and challenge themselves to some form of, excellence isn't even the word, just self-improvement. Excellence is for those who are really crazy hyper-introspective and can't help it. But the thing is, I think that for those types, they'll rise so much further above those who are around them, because those who are around them are barely humans anymore. And I'm not trying to dehumanize them, even though that's literally what I'm doing. But when I say they're barely human, I mean they barely interact with the world as humans for millions of years have done, or whatever.
In particular, I mean, getting back to the Overwatch thing, because I think that there's a lot of sort of sociological and psychological insight to be gained here. You know, this all happens on NA servers again. You don't really get this in Europe, maybe because people don't speak English or whatever. You know, hey man, I'm a Genji man, I'm gonna carry your ass, or some nonsense like that. And this projection of ego, and how allegedly a team game, even if they're not just telling outright fantasies and lies, it's all about some guy ego tripping it and just wanting to. There's no thought of the team. And everything is kind of an afterthought, unless, you know, I need healing. Okay, you know, heal me, whatever. But it's. I think people have lost the ability to cooperate effectively. In addition to all this other stuff, you're right. I mean, it's incredibly easy, and the only sustenance they have, spiritual sustenance, and I hate that word spiritual because I can't think of anything else. At the moment, at least, is a world of fantasy, either by, you know, embellishing to the point of creating just other dimensions, as in the case of this one guy, or these many guys running around, say, in Overwatch playing DPS, believing themselves, often in opposition with the reality, again, because they're not that good, or they're dying a lot, that they're just amazing, and they're doing amazing work. When the reality is, oftentimes they're just dying, and they would be more useful if they didn't move an inch with a Reinhardt shield up.
This really. I'm not. Am I cutting you off?
No, I'm done.
Okay. All right. Sorry. All right. This is exactly what I want to fix. With so that Alt Aspen thing that I talked about previously, that project I'm working on.
Yeah.
This is literally precisely what I want to fix. I want young men, young white men specifically. I know them because I'm one, right? That's at least I have something in common that I understand. Middle class, young white guy growing up right now, just does not have to interact with reality, and it makes them miserable, and so they just do all of these things to cry out, but they don't know how to cry out very well at all, not like women do. And so, but what needs happening is that they need to have a way to force them to interact with nature, with something tangible that won't give, right? Nature won't yield to them. Everything in the world yields to us. It is pathetic. It makes us very weak because it's so easy for us to go, I don't want to deal with this. I don't want to deal with this as resistance. Therefore, I'm going to take the path of least resistance. And that's fine. But when I was younger, I used to put more books in my book bag than I needed. I would take all of the books for anything I could fit for the week in my book bag, along with a book that I would read. And I would carry that with me every single day. Well, I have very big shoulders. It's not by mistake I have very big shoulders. And it's not by doing what makes rational sense in a given moment that I have very big shoulders. It's by looking ahead and going, okay, well, if I just do this, then it will make me stronger. I used to say that to myself. If you just carry a little more, it'll make you stronger. And I used to do that when I was younger. That's all it takes, is that people pushing themselves to be in reality more and with more tangible things, where consequences in nature, you don't bring water, you're miserable. You don't bring enough food, you're miserable.
You're being euphemistic. Yeah, you're miserable, and then you die.
Yeah, well, you can totally go without water for, you can survive a day without water.
Oh, a day, yeah. Although I wouldn't,
2 days.
Someone who fasts on a reasonably regular basis.
Same.
I would never recommend a waterless fast. Always drink water. No, because there's actually a real risk here. I mean, I don't want to get off topic.
Yes.
Don't go, forgo food as long as you want. Well, not much longer than 3 weeks, but water you should drink, you should consume.
Yes. I'm actually in the middle of my morning fast right now. I do a Sunday.
Yeah, I'm about at 24 hours right now. Actually, a little bit past that. I'm about 26 at the moment. But in any event,
That's great. But yes, so my real point at all of this was that these people who simply do not need to interact with reality, and being in the suburbs in Florida made it so that the only interactions I got with nature were going to the Keys.
But Alex, I want to pose a challenging question to you here.
Absolutely.
And the following one. Everything around us is geared in every country in the developed world such that it is perfectly optimized to avoid reality. I mean,
it is.
Very few people, I mean, maybe they would actually enjoy it. Maybe, 90% of people would enjoy it if they were initially forcibly removed from modernity and put out to a cabin in Montana, and I mean, they would stop missing stuff. It would become an afterthought. It's like, I haven't had pizza in 5 months. I don't really miss it because I don't remember what it's like.
Yeah.
But I mean, I don't think most people. We're not going to be forcing people to do that anytime soon. And
no,
I don't. Everything stands in such stark opposition to the plans you have, and just to getting in touch with reality. I think had I been grown up in your generation or even younger, well, I certainly would not have become the person I am, for better or worse. I don't know whether it's for better or worse, but I wouldn't have been able to receive the education. I wouldn't have been as aware of reality as I am. None of these things would. I mean, maybe by dint of my individual traits, I might have managed it. I don't know, but it's all geared towards and you can see this as well. I mean, once again, since you're familiar with Overwatch, it's just very useful to draw analogies from this.
Yeah, absolutely.
People tilting and which is Overwatch speak for getting really angry for the audience.
Yeah.
At a fucking computer game with pixels, getting more angry at that than something that would be in real life much more consequential.
Mm-hmm.
It's a kind of projection, and every aspect of modern life pulls at you and draws you into it. And I think it's unless you somehow manage to forcibly remove yourself from it all.
Mm-hmm.
And here's another aspect as well. All of these sort of underground cultures, whatever you want to, alt-right or neo-reaction, they're all born in the internet. And
Yes.
The internet is one of the great sources, or cesspools, depending on how you want to define it, for a lot of these problems. It's an exceptionally complicated issue.
It's like recursive. I mean, it's a recursive problem.
I think you hit. That's precisely the word. You hit the nail on the head with it. It's just effectively, we're talking about cultural recursion here, because
it's fucked up.
I'll partially attribute to that. I added the cultural parts. Herewith, we have founded the term cultural recursion together.
All right, I like it. Recursion as a concept is a big part of our everything going on today.
Recursion is a facet of the universe itself, mathematics, language. But in any event, cultural recursion. I mean, you discover all this new stuff, but alongside all this new stuff, yes, you can create your echo chamber to sort of blow it away or to keep it out, shut it out. But you're going to encounter it regardless. I mean, look at what happened in the wake, in the aftermath of the Charlottesville nonsense, right? Mm-hmm. It used to be that the alt-right was on very sort of, they didn't really, to adopt some phraseology, but they didn't name the alt-right, right? However, in light of that, many of them draw very clear lines that said, no, alt-right is not alt-right, yada, yada, yada. All stuff on the internet. All this taking place on the internet, and this thing that took place in reality, at the end of the day, an outspilling or an outcropping of what happened on the internet. And then recursively, it forced the people who, for whatever reason, want to walk a certain line and say, well, no, we're alt-right, we're not alt-right. And then it forced the people who are neither alt-right nor alt-right to do whatever. And most recently, Israeli media, rebel media, was, they're going through, there's so much on that right now. It's become clear that, I don't even know what I used to think they were kind of a, obviously very, pro-Jewish, conservative outlet. I don't think they signed for anything other than being pro-Jewish at this stage. And so all this recursion occurred because it all went back, and I just don't see any way of avoiding this unless you're really stoic, and I'm quite stoic, but most people aren't. I mean, they don't let themselves get swayed by it all. Anyway, I'm done.
Here's the secret. Here's the big secret. All right, so my buddy Zach, shout out to Zach. He's my little brother. He's basically somebody I mentored and got him going. I really got him going.
Not biological little brother, but
no, not my biological little brother. So if you ever hear me say little brother, and this is just a general rule for me, Alex. If you ever hear me say little brother, I'm talking about somebody that I'm close to, that I would be willing to live with and spend an inordinate amount of money to support.
So adopted brother, effectively.
Yeah. And I got two of these. One of them I grew up with. He's a few years younger than me. He beat the crap out of me. He's a Marine. But besides that, he is the one who grew up in this area where they disallowed the use of golfing, the golfing in their backyards, and they started letting it overgrow. It's kind of rad. I mean, it's basically a perfect poetic expression of post-urban sprawl, middle-class white guy. You know what I mean? It's the overgrowth taking back over the golf courses and going, no, fuck you old rich guys. We need to actually be in the woods now. Stop playing, And so, anyway, he's back on his feet. It's having fun is the secret. Is you take a guy who's in his late teens, early 20s, all kids growing up, all boys, with some exceptions, have fun with all of your exceptions, but all boys generally think swords are cool.
My parents. See, my parents used to take me on trips all over the world when I was younger, and they're gone now. But not my parents, not yet. I mean, but I haven't even finished my thought. My swords. I had a kind of sword collection.
Yeah.
And what I would do with them was, I needed some practice. I had these sort of cardboard boxes that were meant to be untouched. I would hack them to bits with battle axes and swords and knives and daggers.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, I remember doing that rather fondly, and my mother in particular, just incredulous at it and just couldn't really. Why are you doing this? But anyway, yeah. And that is exactly what I'm getting at. All of them do. I have a young nephew, and this will roll right back into what I'm saying. I have a young nephew who's like, I think he was 9 when I taught him some stuff. We got some good sticks. You can make good sticks, strong sticks that are still young and fresh. Anyway, I taught him basic sword forms. I taught him how to stand up straight, and he got so excited that he walked because this kid is a spaz and he could never stand up straight. Like he was, just no body control, no motor control. But the motivation of wanting to learn how to fight with swords drove him to behave and also maybe I'm a decent teacher, but drove him to behave and learn how to stand up straight and learn posture, learn focus, learn how to drill and do something over and over again, and be proud of it. Be proud of just strength in and of itself. And it's almost a universal that I think is, frankly, swords and using tools and weapons is bred into our DNA, into our instinctive memory. So when we do it, there's something just feels amazing. And guess what? It does not stop when you get old. If you pick up a sword and you whack around with a friend and you're hitting each other with like wooden swords like Shinai. I have these 2 Shinai here. I don't even like kendo. Screw kendo. I don't like it's too much of a sport. I prefer more historical European martial arts or just any kind of practical. I listen to Aikido as well. Anyway, my point is that just hanging out and fighting in some way, that direct, friendly competition is what we're built for. We're predators. We need it. That is what I did with my buddy Zach, and it's like starting an engine, because then you get the connection with your body, and you get why any of it matters, because you're having fun, and that fun is what is driving your desire to self-improve physically. It's what's driving your desire to eat healthy. It's what's driving, like, all of those things come because you just want to have fun. We've completely, and I think that all sports are just mimicking the exhilaration of combat. It's interesting you bring up fun, and I will apologize to the audience for once again bringing up Overwatch, but I mean, by now I have hundreds of hours sunk in that game over the course of a year plus.
Yeah,
and
as a person who's a competitive gamer, I really empathize.
Yeah, Overwatch is not fun. I mean, it's. I've analyzed this with a friend of mine. There's so many elements of the game that are just not fun.
Yeah,
so, and never mind the inability to cooperate. I think that's a dysfunction of human psychology. But people don't play it to have fun. They play it to just solely to boost their ego, to sort of, I'm going to get my kills or whatever. Winning. It's okay.
Yeah, and they have that positive feedback loop where it only shows you all the cool shit that happened. It's all positive.
Yeah, you get a replay of the good stuff you've done.
No, I mean, they were genius. You can tell Blizzard had set up a few Skinner boxes in their time.
Oh, yeah. And, well, I mean, don't get me started. You look at a hero like Mercy, who, I mean, to a T was created for women. She's the most popular hero and has also the most skins. It's almost as if they want to give the female player base more wardrobe selection.
Man, they're playing the left for everything they're worth.
Absolutely, they are.
I love it and hate it. I don't know how I feel about it, but I respect it.
I respect their ability to manipulate people in some way. But all the things you mentioned about having fun and enjoying the process and I mean, yes, it is about winning on some level, but it's all lacking in Overwatch. You never feel, well, maybe I'm unique in this. I doubt it though. It doesn't, even if you have a great game. You know, I had a couple of great games yesterday. Personally, I was on fire. I'm a support main, but I don't play Mercy. Interestingly enough, in that I play the other support mostly in Ana, which is a very high skill cap.
I always used to be what's his name? Luciano?
Lucio.
Yeah. Lucio. Yeah, I
play him a
so
fair
I
bit
used
too.
to play Lucio as well. So we're very similar Overwatch players because Lucio is
I'll have everything's on point. I'm on fire. I'm doing everything, and we still lose. And I mean, don't get me. And this is because this is what I don't like about it. It's claimed to be a team game, but it's not, because your teammates, whatever good plays you have, whatever moves, working cooperatively, you will be punished by people's stupidity and their inability to think. And the activity you're describing sounds actually like it's just something fun, and as you pointed out, you forget the process. Whereas it's so easy to tilt after one or two losses, and then there's something about human psychology that keeps you going. Not necessarily because you think you're going to win somehow, but it just, you get frustrated.
Keeps you going, buddy. Not me.
Precisely.
Yeah. I get anxious. I actually start getting, when I play games like Overwatch too many matches, or if I played an MMO ever, I start getting really depressed. I just get this anxiety that starts overwhelming me.
Yeah, I don't really, I mean, people often wonder, I mean, there's so many reasons to be, not particularly positive about humanity, but when you have a game that's claimed to be a team game with very little in the way of team mechanics, I'll give you, I mean, I know there's a lot of Overwatch jargon, but bear with me. I don't know when you stopped playing, but Genji with his ult, very devastating ult. This is this ninja cyborg guy who can wipe the entire team.
Yeah.
He receives a nano boost by Ana, which amplifies the damage by 50%.
Oh, I remember. I heard about her support stuff. So
I am an Ana. I have historically been on a main. It's very difficult to do a random sleep dart. Anyway, I have a lot of practice. I slept him, preventing his ult from execution. However, if you wake him up, it continues, and when he's nano boosted, he will cut the entire team down. I slept him in the middle of the air, 30 meters away. We would have won the match, but some idiot on my team instantly wakes him up. He cuts me down, he cuts the other support down, and everything falls apart. And this is what I mean that, this is kind of a separate issue, but people seem these days not to be able to work as a team. We could have, as a team, won the match. We didn't because some idiot thought he knew better or whatever. Maybe it's just the lack of personal interaction, and maybe in real life, if people, as you pointed out, with their sticks or what have you, you're just
with their sticks.
Much more attentive. But there's something that online culture, online gaming culture in particular, never seems to be able to capture, and that is this attentiveness to working together and enjoying the process.
Check this out. All right. So, if I and someone else are sword fighting, this is exactly on what you're talking about. If I and someone else are sword fighting one another, something that's fascinating with sword fighting is there's no way to write down the kinesthetic experience of it. Do you know what I mean by kinesthetic?
Yes.
Yeah, and so for anybody who doesn't, and this is for video games as well, it's the same thing that makes me like video games makes me like sword fighting, except sword fighting's even better. So the kinesthetic experience is just the feel of the fun, like the physical, your senses picking it up, the movement, the action, the force being exerted. And with sword fighting, what's fascinating is it's not just something that you see happen. There are very subtle things that you find out while you're fighting, and you go like, and this is the issue with it. It's very hard to describe with words, and it's the reason I just get people out there. Because what happens is, I'll throw a swing down at you, right? And then you'll block that, and I'll feint at the last second, and if that hits you, I'm going to keep doing it. That's how I teach people. I'm just going to keep doing what hit you, until you figure out exactly the trick to how to block it. And there's a moment, because there's no words exchanged in this entire process, and there's a moment between two people where one person who's very confident, who's having fun just hitting his friend, gets stunned because his friend stopped him, and his friend goes, "Ah!" and now, between those two people, the game has changed. No words have been said, but they know everything's different now. And now they have to do completely new things. And it's a dance. It's a communication between two people that, while it's competitive, it's just fun teamwork. You're just having fun figuring stuff out with your buddy. And that is the beauty. It's basically dancing for men. I love dancing in American. I was in American musical theater the 1 year I was in high school, and I loved it so much. I love dancing. I love singing. I love acting. I love doing them all at the same time, like an insane person. And sword fighting kicks that ass. You know, that was terrible grammar, but you get the idea.
Yeah. Would you at least concede that, I guess, the widespread promulgation of activities of this sort it is probably inactionable and would have to be very much a local phenomenon. So you live in Ohio, whatever.
Yes, 100%. But I'll drive. But even local in America, what's kind of cool is I think we have people spaced out enough that this is totally doable. Like,
right.
You know, because like I'm willing to drive like an hour or two to hang out with a bunch of people, you know, and teach basic skills. I was talking to people online, and funny enough, 2 girls got in touch with me before any guys did. Which is like really, like, I don't
want to... One must question their motive, I think.
Well, so here's the idea is what I'm going to do is, if I teach girls, I'm going to keep girls and guys separate, and then I'm going to find a girl who is apt enough and have her teach the girls group. But I want that to be a separate group. What's beautiful is in the nationalist side of things, nobody has a problem with that. Nobody's going to bitch or moan about it. Everybody's totally fine with it. They're like, oh, yeah, no, definitely. Girls and guys should be separate. It's like, oh, thank gosh. The world makes sense here. Good. And that will keep everything fine. Because if you do sword fighting around girls, no, we're not.
Well, it's not just that. I mean, there's an entire... I've seen this in Overwatch again, but when women are at play...
That's what I mean, yeah.
The
guys are just totally different.
Pardon me. Yeah, the guys are different. They lose their. I've been for years now an advocate of single sex schools, separate. That is, sex separated or gender separated schools. I don't think it's ideal that girls and boys study on the same premises. It's distracting for both of them.
It screwed me up. I remember distinctively. I had a war with my own sex drive growing up, for the better. Then that you want to talk about self-improvement, that was weird, but it's good. Because I saw how guys acted around girls and I didn't like it, and I was like, I didn't want to be like that. So I tried to figure out any part of my psychology that controlled me in that way and eliminated it, which is why I am familiar with your work, right? And then I let it back up in a controlled environment with one person, right? So I'm never looking at girls and judging and going, oh, I would like to have sex with her. I've never thought that since I was like a young teen. So anyway, my point is that I think that for anyone that isn't guarding themselves aggressively against fawning over females, they're fucked. In the school environment, they're fucked, guys.
Yeah, I mean that.
It's just not gonna work. The women
really
are just
weird. By definition, if you're in a school environment, you're not 40 or 50 years old, presumably. It's going to be... It's just so disruptive to the male capacity for excellence and learning and just doing a good job, because, let's face it, our education is artificial. Reproductive instincts are not. And what does that take precedence? Well, it's pretty obvious.
Yeah.
But... even that, which I think is a very mild statement, is regarded as blasphemous by anyone in the mainstream.
Well, but what's ironic is those are the same people who are going to say, like... Those are the same people who are spouting off about rape culture and how evil men are.
And
it's like, listen, we all win. By your arguments that I think are insane, we both still win in this.
Yeah. The thing is, they claim people, I'm big on data and studies, but I don't think you need necessarily masses of data and studies on this, because it's obvious that girls are distracting to boys and boys are distracting to girls at a time when, in the vast majority of cases, teenage pregnancy is not a good thing. But also, in really formative years where they could be acquiring useful knowledge that will help them with critical thinking. Well, women probably less so, but regardless, it will be of benefit certainly to males. And the idea is just sort of, there's some schools that still exist along these lines, but it's regarded as just completely antithetical to this. Everyone is the same, blah-de-blah-de-blah-de-blah. And I guess if I had any vision, one of the first things I would implement. I think it's just been very destructive. Never mind the fact that, things we were talking about, or I reference as, being a young teenager or kind of adolescent, hacking cardboard boxes up with daggers and battle axes.
Which is adorable, by the way. That's hilarious.
Not atypical for a young male.
No.
That sort of thing, had I lived in a different age, I would have been medicated, probably. 20 years. Well,
yes.
If I'd been that 12-year-old...
My parents were very against, fortunately, with how obviously insane I am by normal standards. I really do think that had my parents been of a different mind, I would have been medicated to being a very... We wouldn't have ended up with Alex. We wouldn't have ended up with me. And because I'm definitely a little out of the box, and not in a great way sometimes, right?
Well, yeah, but I know for sure I would have been, get him on meds. Everything is just, you mentioned this just prior. It's a strange paradox that mainstream women and then men who are in compliance with them will complain about lack of performance on the part of males in society and not being able to quote unquote man up and whatever. Yet all the conditions that are laid down before them make it exceptionally difficult and disallow for it in most cases. If they actually wanted the best outcome, we would have gender separated schools.
Well, and you would also, so here's the issue, we've also taken out what is fun to men.
Oh yeah.
From from young, so men need to be playing, because guess what, most of the population, they need to know how to build shit with their hands. Most of your population needs to make stuff.
Yeah, I enjoyed playing with clay as a child.
And I think that everyone should at least, and this is why I encourage the whole, I have a blanket idea of, listen, everybody enroll and pursue a trade, become a journeyman at something, and then if you want to do something academic, and if you really want to do something academic, great, then do it. The trade doesn't take that long to, you just work on it for a year, you have the certifications. That will have you a career. At any point, you can go out and do that, and you'll make good money doing it, right? And it'll get you by. And then you can pursue your academic career. You get them in the trades at an early enough age, then this can all take place on a timetable that makes sense. That will pretty much solve a lot of the issues that white young men have with everything. Because
wouldn't it solve issues with men in general, though? I know your focus being on alt-right, but
that's the thing. So I do, and you're totally right. It's kind of one of those reasons I've been thinking about this. I wanted to discuss this with you briefly. Of how should I be framing alt-Aspen? Should this be framed towards the alt-right? Should it be framed towards nationalists?
That's up to you, but here's the thing.
Well, I understand, but I'm just saying it's universal. This is, a lot of these things are just, it's kind of like Proverbs. If you read Proverbs and you go hey, hold on, if I do a lot of these things regardless of believing in God, this is going to work out. It's not because I'm blessed that these things are going to work out.
And I've tried to drive this home with the alt-right, who just don't understand or don't want to. But
Interested. Your nuance.
Fucking nuance.
I love him though.
What I kind of jokingly refer to as the WQ, which in this context, when it's sort of reproductive behavior, I've talked a lot about the JQ. I acknowledge blah blah blah. Yes, it's something real. Okay, but there are problems throughout all sorts of ethnic groups shot throughout Western society. They really come down to gender interaction and how things have been going for decades. And it's up to you, but I think that if you were to pursue this, it's much better to pursue it as a resource for males rather than framing it as y'all's niggas, so I ain't helping you or something like that.
well, for me though, the thing is what my goals personally are is the subtitle for Alt Aspen is cultural reforestation. Isn't that nice? It's like nice and anyway. What I'm trying to do is reforest white culture, European white culture, especially that, I suppose, of the Yankee and the Northerner. I think the Southern nationalists, like Musonius Rufus, I recommend Rebel Yell podcast with Musonius Rufus. They're totally reforming Southern culture in such a way that I'm like, oh my God, you guys are doing a great job. I'll try to help out everybody up here because they kind of have their own thing going on. They're great. They're good reactionaries. But I kind of am looking at, I lived right near Youngstown, Ohio. I went to the Giant Eagle the other day, which is a very northeastern thing to say, to a grocery store, and I saw a person I know there, and she said, "Oh, hey, what's up?" And I said hi to her, and we talked for a moment over the hood of my car, and she went, "Oh, it looks like somebody overdosed over there." I went, "What?" She's like, "It looks like there was an overdose." And I was like, "What? Why?" Well, there's two cops. And I'm like, is this is a normal thing that people say in Ohio? Somebody overdosed over there again? It's that common. And that is why my focus tends to be on these guys who are starting to die massively from this purposeless existence. And I also want them to be the dominant culture in America. I want them to be the dominant culture. So I do kind of have my hat in with the team, kind of. But at the same time, black culture needs some help too.
But the thing is, strike me as a guy saying, chanting race war now.
No, I just really like white culture. I really want it to be dominant. That's it. And by dominant, I just mean I want it to be. All it has to do is assert itself as being there, and then everybody's happy with it. That's it. That will bring order to this chaos. That's all it has to be, is just white males asserting themselves as white males and being very proud of the lifestyle that they lead and not taking shit from other cultures and not bowing down to other cultures. I think that will reestablish a dominance in our countries enough that the laws will follow, essentially. So the culture, so the laws. And it doesn't have to be crazy. I'm not an insane person. I'm not trying to deport everyone. That's not my attitude at all. I think
the question is just how what you're suggesting is essentially is a kind of lead by example, engage in a positive activity. Probably some of the best suggestions I've ever heard from someone claiming to be on the alt-right for promoting certain ideas.
Well,
1488 race war now. Maybe, but that's not going to actually accomplish nearly as much as what you're suggesting.
That's something that you say and do. Okay, I kind of when there's a war, but there's not. So let me put it this way: this guy said, because he kind of was saying to me, he's a good guy. I liked him. I worked with him. I just changed jobs recently, found a new job. But this guy, he said to me you're too nice. You take too much shit. And I went, no. I'm really nice. And I carry a gun on me. I'm extremely nice because if you do anything to threaten my life, I will kill you. Period. But I don't have to be mean about that. I'm a really nice guy because of it. And I think that is the attitude that the alt-right should take.
You remind me of my late friend who shot himself to death. But anyway, yeah, he was a bit like that too. Always had his guns.
But I was just looking up AR-15 strip lowers before I called. I'm very excited about building my AR, but hunting and stuff. But my point isn't be nice to people because you're gonna kill them. Like, that's not what I'm trying to say. What I'm trying to say is be nice to people with the confidence that if things go really bad, you're gonna be fine. But if you're confident, then you have no reason to scream and be angry and want a race war, frankly. Because if you're confident, then you should be building as hard as you can. Because guess what happens in war? You lose your best men on the front lines. You lose the best. If you want what's best for European descent, then you don't want a race war, because you'll lose your best. Just because these people feel like they have nothing to lose or something like that. I don't know what that attitude is from, but frankly, that's not how my parents ever raised me. And they didn't raise me to be violent either. I learned that from other ethnic groups. They taught me about violence and what it's about. And it makes sense to me. And I think that a lot of these guys that are, hey, I don't want to be an asshole about this, but a lot of these guys that are saying that, I don't know if they've actually been in a terminal situation.
Well, I think
because
everything sounds great, in theory.
I've been in situations where I've almost died. I have been shot at. I have been in situations where I've been in fights where I could have been killed very, very easily.
It's happened to me a few times.
Because I was at other people's hands. I was totally out of my own hands, and they could have easily killed me. So those situations make me a very nice person, and they're also why I carry a weapon. Because if you are actually thinking that somebody is going to try to kill you, you do not feel good. Period. It's not a good feeling to have to keep, like, imagine having to keep your rifle right next to you loaded in bed because you are legitimately afraid that somebody's going to kill you every night. I suppose this is a warning to people. Do meditations about that. Meditate on your own. In Hagakure, which is about I'm not getting too sidetracked, I swear to God. In Hagakure, or Book of the Five Leaves, it's about, the warrior gentleman. It's Japanese, obviously, written in the late Edo period. A good book. Geez, sorry about that. It's kind of an aside, but meditate, they would say meditate on your death every day. Imagine all the different ways that you could die. Every single day. Wake up.
But I'm weird.
That, I think, is something that they're not doing. They're thinking of glory. They're thinking of winning. And I get it.
Well, it's kind of that prototypical story of the boy, the child who wishes that he could take up arms, as his father does, as his father goes off to war. Father returns in a body bag, and he still child doesn't quite grasp it. I mean, I have no background with guns, but I've been assaulted by certain denizens on occasion, outnumbered in every instance, and it's not fun being in a situation like that. It's stressful. It's a situation you want to get out of usually, rather than remain immersed in.
And this goes right back to what we've been talking about. There's a through line, and that is the inability for people, like the disconnect from reality that they have.
Yeah.
Not having to deal with reality. If you have to, guess what? I bet that if me and these guys, I don't know, I bet that under enough training that they would have enough respect to not talk in the way that they're talking about violence. Because under enough training, you'll feel enough trauma that, I don't, like, this is fun,
But if you were actually going to try to kill me, that would make me feel really not good, right? That's the issue. Like, it's so much more, it makes life so much more stressful than these people even, I think, can comprehend.
Part of the problem is, once again, I mean, I've talked about this with Rational Expat quite a bit, but it's modernity. Modernity has created a veil that covers up death, sickness. I mean, yes, people fall ill, they get cancer, but it's never in front of you. Whereas,
I've experienced it. I've had people there.
Indeed, you have. But imagine, I mean, things that none of us, neither you nor I, have experienced it. Living in a 14th century village in England, with the rotting, bubonic plague-infested corpses of your neighbors and your children there, and you're probably already caught it, and you're gonna die pretty soon. As well, marauding soldiers, raping the
My
women.
great-grandmother, the families on the houses on either side, entire families, like 8 or 9 people, all died when they were growing up.
And my mother, my maternal grandmother, because my father grew up with a stepmother, I think a week or two, due to complications of giving birth, died after giving birth to my father. So we're just so removed from, death, dying, and sickness and illness in a way. I mean, we still are afflicted by it, but not in a way that's upfront enough that people can actually think, oh, maybe we don't want a massive race war, because that would be really destructive.
Yeah. Well, and they've never experienced destruction. I mean, like, these people don't know what, like, any of these places look like. I mean, I also went to the really poor part of Cancun on a missions trip, which was, it seemed stupid. It seemed like a waste of time. But I was young, right? So it was like the church, whatever. We went to a sister church, but we went to the poor part of Cancun. They turned the water off like half of the day every day during the summer for the poor part and give it to the resorts. So you just don't have water for half the day. And that's just the whole city. That's just normal there. And then you drive out and there's squatting Mayan villages. And they live on almost nothing. Yeah, and I went to, there were some Mayan villages and they would squat in the jungles. So they could just be evicted whenever the property owners wanted them to be, but they weren't. So they had these little villages in the jungles, and they didn't have anything. They had to walk to go get water, that kind of stuff. So it was fascinating because when I came home, I had like a culture shock of like my own pantry and having food. Seriously, like it just blew my mind.
Well, I had a culture shock, even in the heart of Europe. There's some, I don't know if this has changed, but I remember taking a trip to Italy in my 20s, in imitation of Goethe's trip. He had a book called The Italian Journey, and I had this sort of fanciful notion of imitating his route and everything. And then up in this, I don't remember the rural village, and they only had squatter toilets, and or ditches in some cases. Wow! And then I was very grateful when normal plumbing was again applicable.
Oh yeah. But what you'll hear from a lot of people who have gone like to very, very poor primitive areas is that when they hear somebody complain about a flight delay, they get so like, really, dude? Like because what happens is it puts into, when you get away from it, and I don't even think it takes 5 months for somebody not to care anymore. If you take someone away from modernity, people have lived in it literally from the day they were born, never really been outside of it for real. If you take somebody from modernity and you put them in the woods with people that they do trust, people that are they're close to, real bonds, and you keep them out there for a few days, seriously, just like a few days or like a week, you're good. Like, you come back and it totally changes everything. It really changes how you look at the things that you have and how valuable they are. And then it changes the value of money because you need less if you get used to it, So you can living with less is what going forward is what's going to save a lot of the millennial generation. It's going to be a new, even more isolated kind of depression, but in its own weird way. I think they'll be fine though, because you can be poor in America and be pretty okay. You know.
Oh,
you can
well, I mean, Thomas Sowell, I'm sure the alt-right doesn't like him because he doesn't have, he's not white, but whatever. I
base
admire
black
him.
guy.
Yeah, he's a very famous black intellectual, conservative economist.
That's the alt-right translation. Base black guy.
Based, right. He's driven on this point in several discussions he's had, and he talks about, well, the definition of poor is one that is constantly abused by politicians because poverty in some shithole in Bolivia is vastly different from someone who is technically classified as poor but has a television, a laptop, watches HBO films, eats Kentucky Fried Chicken, whatever.
Yeah.
I mean, that is not a traditional definition of poverty. You're not struggling. It just means that you might have less dispensable or disposable income. You might not be driving around in a Benz or whatever, but that's not exactly poor.
And I will say, I'd rather be self-sufficient and poor with a little bit of property than to be wealthy and renting.
Yeah, well, I wish I could.
And that's the thing, but that is a whole level of responsibility that a lot of people don't actually feel. They think that they would like that, but the amount of work that it actually takes to have a garden and food and hunt, that's a lot of effort, right?
Well, if anyone can do it, it's you.
Well, my attitude is the thing is, Alt Aspen, I just want to say this. I think you'll appreciate this. Alt Aspen is not for most people. It's for the small subset of people who are seeking to self-improve it is for anyone who can do it, but people are only going to put so much effort towards. So the people who do get ahead with it will be among their friends aristocrats, essentially. They'll be the most self-improved among their friends, and they will lead them. That's the goal. That's all I really care about. Everything else, comes from that. You just make a few leaders. You only have to make a small number of leaders. If you can make a small number of leaders, they can move, 5 people each, 10 people each, and then they can all have their own micro. And that's all I care about. It's seeds, So that's kind of what Alt Aspen's about. It's getting people to deal with responsibility better. And that's something that I saw the hippie community never do, because these are all, in Florida, all middle-class kids who never had to deal with nature, whose parents sent them a stipend, or kind of just abandon them in Florida but still give them trickles of money. And nobody has to deal with the real world. So everybody can do drugs and be messes, right? And lie about living in Kenya or something. Or whatever it was.
Yeah. Living in Kenya and speaking fluent Portuguese and Spanish.
It's just making it fun, man. If you can make it fun and you can get your friends to do it with you, these are young guys, in their early 20s. It's something to do that isn't drinking. Training with guns and swords sounds awesome, so let's do it. And that's kind of, I think we'll say, imagine if, unless we could force people out to muster for local militias every, the second Tuesday of every month. If we could get back to that, I would do that too. But we're not there, so.
Yeah, and the recursive culture. As you pointed out, Blizzard, for example, is part of the problem because they're creating a situation where these sorts of activities become less accessible, and even they create a game in such a way that it's just not. Even the potential in the game itself is not realized because of the mechanics they've implemented and just the way it's set up.
And there's
and they don't care because they're turning a profit.
And I will say that going out and having fun in the real world and doing archery and stuff in my free time has really taught. I really enjoy video games more now because my time with them is more precious. It's more. It's the relaxing is way better when you push yourself.
Oh, absolutely. Oh, I know from experience. If I do some long work-related task and it's finally done, and I'm run out in Skyrim, wandering through Skyrim is more fun, for sure.
Yeah. And I would say also, Florida. Don't go to South Florida. There's no woods down there. There's only swamps. No, seriously. There's only swamps and the ocean. And guess what? If you're a white person, you can only see so much ocean before you really hunger for the woods again.
I'm not sure if that's particularly scientific, but I'll take your word for it.
It's not. It's not. And I did grow up.
I'm not a fan of the ocean. I've never been. I don't know.
I think that you get sick of it because there's supposed to be like the ocean and then also pine woods there, and it's just concrete. So it's just concrete and then the ocean, and then I don't know how any human being.
I've never had an interest in beaches or anything like that. I've always preferred. Yeah, I don't know if that's a testament to my whiteness or whatever, but forests and mountains and fjords and.
Like, I really do
beaches. I just don't. I don't know. I think it's just. I don't know what evidence exists to suggest that, but I certainly don't like beaches.
Can you imagine no seasons? It's a weird time stasis. The entire time
well,
you're there.
I've pushed. I've tried to. I've tried to appeal to the gods on several occasions to institute a one-season autumn-only policy. But they have been negligent in responding to me. I think I need to sacrifice more goats.
Leaves. So check this out. Instead of leaves falling in one season in Florida, palm fronds just fall all year, and it never stops getting sunny. It's a miserable place where there's just there's either beds of pine needles or there's palm trees and swamps, and there's nothing for humans to live on. So I definitely prefer, I'd say live near where there's woods. That's the one tip if we're talking about locations. Don't live in South Florida.
North Carolina is quite nice in that regard.
Yeah, a little bit temperate. Anyway, this was a fun talk. We went all over the place. I feel like I covered my bases, generally speaking.
Yeah, I need to post a link to your channel. Let's remind the audience of your channel and
is the name of the channel. VOXKOSHKA.
Yeah, just you'll have to send me a link. So it's
on the internet. Is that?
Yeah. But everyone, thanks for joining us. It was we were a bit all over the map, but as you can see, Alex is very enthusiastic about many things, and a bit more nuanced than your typical alt-writer as well.
Oh, I appreciate it.
I hope that everything he is striving for comes to fruition. And he's still young, so probabilistically speaking, he still has time, as I like to say. So thanks for tuning in. I will check you guys out later, and do check out his channel. Bye-bye. If you liked this video, please like, share, and subscribe. And if you enjoy my content, please consider making a donation or becoming a patron. Thanks for watching.